Hello and a very warm welcome to Political Economy with Shweta Punch. The big story we're tracking here is the relationship between India and the United States. What happens now that 50% tariffs have been levied on India? What are India's options? Is it the end of the friendship as we have known it, as we've seen it? The bromance or the bonhomie between US President Donald Trump and Prime Minister Mr. Narendra Modi has been on display for several years. Did we see this coming? Did we see the relations souring between the two countries to this extent? And what is at stake? Where do we go from here? What are India's options? To understand this in greater detail, I'm joined by Mr. Jayant Dasgupta, former ambassador at the WTO, someone who has tracked and represented India in some very crucial negotiations and discussions. Dr. Dasgupta, thank you so much for taking up the time and joining us on Money Control. I have to ask you the first question that I think is on everyone's minds. What happens now? Because when US President Trump announced these penalty tariffs on India, no one was really expecting that. We were thinking that it's a negotiation tactic, and we've been dismissive of it even now to a degree. But having said that, we've been pushed into a corner. So, where do we go from here, Dr. Dasgupta?
The first thing is that this only goes to show President Trump's unpredictability. He has, on the one hand, been shifting the goalposts again and again for everyone, starting with his closest allies like Canada, Mexico, the European Union, Japan. And he's been threatening them, and he has had his way with Japan, the European Union, and with a host of other countries, but not so far with Canada and Mexico. One of the reasons why he hasn't had his way with Mexico and Canada is because these countries have a lot of secured access to the US market, upwards of 85% of their products. So they are secure in the belief that the balance 10 to 15% products which will be subjected to these new tariffs. Canada has been slapped with 35% tariffs, will not really matter very much. So that is one thing. Okay. The second point is that he has chosen his targets very carefully, in a sense that the countries which have the ability to retaliate, and there aren't too many of them, he has steered clear of getting into a face-off with them or a frontal conflict with them. And China comes to mind immediately. He has again given a 90-day reprieve after the first waiver of 90 days before imposing the tariffs. So he has calculated that India really can't retaliate in terms of the goods trade. Because if you look at the basket of products which India imports from the US, and it is far less than the basket that India exports to the US, and there is a trade surplus of $45 billion approximately that India enjoys. But the products that India buys from the US, if you look at them, chemicals, unpolished and uncut diamonds, a lot of capital goods, some mineral oil, and the oil imports are going up, in fact, in the past year or so. So if you take all these products, which are basically meant to keep the wheels of our industry rolling, if we retaliate, we will end up paying more to some other supplier, and thereby making our own industry uncompetitive. So we can't really retaliate in a sense. So he has, I think, figured that out, or his team has figured that out very carefully. The other point is that in services, in H-1B visas, and a host of other areas, we are hugely dependent on the US. And therefore, our exports are approximately $33-34 billion worth of services.
Right.
And the US exports are more. They are about $41 billion at the last count. But a lot of our professionals work in the US. And if you look at the country with the largest volume or value of inward remittances, which helps us tide over the current account deficit, it is the US which is a very major and significant contributor to the inward remittances. So if there is something to happen to the H-1B visas, that will also hit us very badly. So all these factors are there which we have to take into account while deciding on the way forward.
So we can't antagonize Trump, and from what you've said, that we cannot think of retaliatory tariffs go from here. So that cannot be our reaction to Trump's tariffs. So then, what are our options, Dr. Dasgupta? We have a negotiating team that will be visiting India at the end of the month. So far, that's what is on the cards. That the U.S. team is expected to visit India at the end of the month. How should India be approaching these negotiations?
Well, if you take a cue from what he said at a press conference, and he is in the habit of saying these things off the cuff. When a reporter asked President Trump about further negotiations, he said no, not until the tariff issue is resolved. So there is a big question mark hanging over this visit of the US delegation from the 25th of August for the 6th round of negotiations. No official communication has been received yet, I understand, by the Indian government that it has been called off. But it is there hangs a pall of uncertainty over this negotiation. And in any case, this negotiation, barring the frills which will be added, will be basically about tariffs. And if there is no understanding arrived at on the tariffs, which form really the core or the heart of this agreement which we are trying to work out, then the frills really won't matter very much. So this is something which we have to bear in mind, that unless the tariff issue gets sorted out, this trade agreement will not reach finality. Even the first tranche, which was supposed to be harvested by fall,
September,
which is October or so. Yeah.
Right. So you're saying that we'll have to reduce tariffs, but when penalty tariffs were levied on India by President Trump, he raised the issue of Russian oil. So now that's led to, and like you said, in the beginning, that he has been constantly shifting the goalpost. So is it a tariff issue? Is it a Russian oil issue? Or is there a larger, game at play here? Are we talking about maybe a complete shift in key alliances? Are we looking at building a bloc to counter China? Is there something bigger at play here, Dr. Dasgupta?
Well, I don't think President Trump has really got a very, detailed game plan while imposing tariffs, because he's been doing it, quite erratically and without reason. For instance, the tariffs that he imposed on Brazil were not because of a trade surplus, because Brazil actually has a trade deficit with respect to the US. So there was no reason to impose tariffs on Brazil. In fact, he should have, reduced the tariffs to -5% or -10% to, have an even playing field, level playing field. But he did it because of the treatment that he thinks the present Brazilian government is handing out to the ex-president Bolsonaro. And that is, through the courts of law, etc. Now, the latest reports show that he has perhaps acted at the behest of, some lobbies, business lobbies on both sides. And he has actually reduced the tariffs from 50% without announcing it to something closer to 30%.
Oh,
so there is no way
okay.
of predicting. Yes, this is the latest news which is coming in from some sources. So there is no
Okay.
way really of predicting what he is going to do. One. Second
Hmm.
point is,
Hmm.
suppose hypothetically that India were to stop buying Russian oil.
Yeah.
He will say this is not enough. I also mentioned something about Russian arms and ammunition. So please stop buying from them immediately.
Yeah.
So we
Yeah.
do that hypothetically. Then he
Right.
will say, I also said that the BRICS is an anti-US coalition and it is out to de-dollarize the global economy. So please walk out of BRICS and let me know when you have walked out. So, and it will never stop. Tomorrow it could be something else altogether. Suppose we, go in for something which helps our economy, diversifying our export basket. I was going to come to that shortly.
Yeah. Yeah.
He will say, no, you can't, build up, deeper trade relationships with, let's say, the European Union or Japan or the Southeast Asian countries. So there is no stopping it. So there is no predicting. As far as the options open to India are concerned, there is no alternative but to diversify our exports. And to that end, I think the UK trade agreement FTA, which we have signed, which will of course come into effect from about March or April, because they are going through the process of vetting it. And then we have to conclude the EU FTA, which is at an advanced stage, and we have already said that we would try to, close it by the end of this year. So we should try to speed it up and get it done before that, because they also have a slightly lengthy process of ratification, etc. Then we have some very significant FTAs with Japan, Korea, the ASEAN countries. So let us try to deepen those FTAs and widen them to provide, greater mutual benefits. So as in the past, when we had been saying that, we can't rely on imports, we must become self-reliant and, produce as much in the country as possible, especially of the strategically important products. Similarly, now the time has come for us to, not rely on one country for the majority of our exports, because the US accounts for approximately 18% of our exports. Suppose it were to come down and we were to diversify and, in fact, grow our exports to other parts of the world, like the Europeans, like South America, like Africa, which we have still not explored to the extent that is required. So in that case, our reliance or the shock that we can get from one source of our export, one destination of our exports, will come down. And other countries will also have less leverage on India. The last point you raised, I think, is about the relationship. And I think the MEA has already answered that question. Our relationship with the US is a very long-standing, friendly relation. We have differed on issues, but we have never really had a major falling out. Apart from what I can remember is the 1971 Bangladesh conflict, when the US sent its 7th Fleet, which is being recounted, I think, by many in the press. So, barring that, I don't think there has ever been, a major falling out. The thing is that we have relations going, back to more than a century. That is one. And it has withstood the test of time. The second thing is, because of the new aggression shown by Xi Jinping's government, and even before that, in the Indo-Pacific, and the kind of, actions they have taken on our border, and the other issues about, Hambantota, Gwadar, and the other, naval bases that they are building up, encircling us all around, and the BRI, which is being used also to further its military interests, we need to be a part of Quad. whether there is trade with the US or not. Irrespective
Right.
of that, we need to be a part of Quad, and we need to have uh, this security interests of ours being being taken together with the security interests of the others around the Indo-Pacific, Japan, Australia, the US, Korea, for instance, which has not joined yet, but could join in the near future. So our relationship, this is just one part of the relationship. It's an important part, but there are other very important parts also. So the
Absolutely.
relationship will continue. Of course, it would have been dented a little bit, and public perception of the Americans, of the current US administration, as being unreliable, I think has gained some currency. But the view about Americans in general, I don't think that has suffered at all. It is the US citizens are their education institutions, their hospitals, their healthcare system, their medical research, and their cutting edge research in various fields of science and technology. They are hugely admired and respected in India.
Right. So, Dr. Dasgupta, if the negotiations happen, what advice would you give to the negotiators in dealing with a temperamental Trump? You mentioned that on Brazil, the tariffs were levied on Brazil for entirely different reasons from trade. It was a personal dislike that President Trump had, and that's how he retaliated towards Brazil. What is happening with India? Is there some personal, something that has really upset him? Was it something that happened after the Pahalgam, terror attacks, and the whole, with him coming out and saying that he's played mediator and the Indian government denying it? Is that something that upset him? Because when you look at tariffs also, he's called out India for being a tariff king, but theoretically speaking and practically speaking, the fact is that our tariffs are well within WTO rules. We have followed the rules, and for developing countries, we are allowed to have higher tariffs. And these are only tariffs that we get to, that he speaks about. But for American companies that have invested in India, the rules have been fairly easy for them actually to come and set up and expand their operations. And this is one of the biggest markets for them. I'm talking about the big tech companies that are operating in India. So it works both ways. So what's your sense here? What advice would you give to negotiators? And I'm just going to ask you to take a guess there. What do you think is playing on President Trump's mind, in this whole backlash against India?
The first thing which comes to mind, of course, I don't think there is anything personal, because I think President Trump doesn't do things on a personal basis in any of his dealings. It is always strictly business. And of course, this issue about ex-President Bolsonaro of Brazil, he is a rightist and pro-American, person. And the regime that he ran was very openly pro-American. And including, giving up the rights of special and differential treatment at the WTO for a developing country, which Brazil had foregone at the WTO during his regime. So that is a separate issue. And President Lula, coming from a trade union background, is an avowed leftist with a history of more than 30, 40 years in leftist politics. So that is a different issue. It is about the politics. But I think to that extent, President Trump does not have, I think, any animus or bias towards Prime Minister Modi. I don't think that is one of the reasons. The reasons could be manifold. One of them is that President Trump wants to have countries aligning with US interests, which I think has come out in the executive order also, that you have to align yourself with US interests, which is that if the US is fighting a war, it is your war. If you are fighting your war, it may not be the US's war. That is the way the current US administration thinks. So if he says that, the Russia-Ukraine war is the topmost priority for the president, then it should be your priority and you should try your level best to make the Russians come to the negotiating table by shutting off their supply of, foreign exchange money with which they can fuel the war. So that is one thing. If it comes to a conflict in any other area, which the US is not so keen on, handling or intermediating or stopping, then you can do whatever you want to, provided the US does not consider you to be inimical to its, acting in a way inimical to its interests. So it is basically about, I think, moving towards or acknowledging that there is already a bipolar world and you have to align yourself either with the Chinese, in which case you will be persona non grata, so to say, or you align yourself with the US interests, in which case you have to listen to everything which the US issues, diktats of the US. So this is a very tough situation, and I don't think the world really is ready for this kind of a bipolar world. And I'm reminded of something which President Bush had said, that Bush Jr. had said, and he had said, you are either against us or with us, or reportedly words to that effect. So that is not something which India, with a policy, avowed policy of multi-alignment, which used to be, I think, non-alignment earlier, but it is the same thing in a different mold. So that, I don't think it is easy for us to accept that.
So it's a tough task for the negotiators, Dr. Dasgupta. Do you think India has room to lower tariffs to pacify President Trump, or will India have to live with these 50% tariffs and we should be prepared to deal with the pain until we are able to explore alternate markets?
Well, I wanted to first touch upon another thing in the context of what you just asked. There is no room for reducing any further tariffs, because on industrial products, from what I hear, India has already offered near zero tariffs, and President Trump has acknowledged that the Indians have said that you can have zero duty access on industrial products, or something to that effect. So India has already, I think, done more than what it could, or what it feels comfortable with. On agriculture, which is a question of livelihood for millions of people, twice as many people who are there in the US are involved in agriculture alone in India. And even in the case of dairy farming, it is humongous. The figure is about 7 crore. So these are not small figures. And already we have seen the impact of COVID, when many of our small-scale industries were shut in the urban or semi-urban centers, and people were forced to go back to their villages. Many of them have not come back to their, small industrial units to get back their employment. They are still, working in agriculture, which is shown up in the figures for Manrega, the offtake of Manrega. So you just can't take a risk. You can't lower tariffs any more. Two, it is not a question of placating President Trump, because he has already set his guns on another target, which is Russian oil. And as I mentioned, there is no way you can placate him by stopping, the purchase of Russian oil. The last point I wanted to mention is, suppose hypothetically, we were to reduce tariffs to zero for everything. Suppose we do it for agriculture, dairy, everything. The next US administration, President Trump would be about 82 or 83 by the time the next elections take place. It would be in most likelihood somebody else. And whether it is a Republican or Democrat, do you think he will roll back, or she will roll back the tariffs, the advantages that they have pocketed in this round? No. Even when you had somebody ideologically quite, opposed to President Trump's policies in the first term, President Biden, he didn't roll back all the tariffs that President Trump had imposed in his first term.
Yeah, there are no
So whatever you concede will be pocketed and will be, carried on. So whatever you do, will be a kind of a permanent ceding of territory of advantage of benefits. So you have to bear that in mind, and our negotiators have to bear that in mind as well.
So what are the levers that India has at this point? We can't lower tariffs any further. We should not stop import of Russian oil. Then how does one deal with with the president who's just throwing a tantrum on the global stage?
Well, for one thing, the Russian oil advantage of prices that we had, of a significant advantage, has petered out almost. Now it is just about $2 to $3 per barrel. That is what has been calculated, and we buy approximately, ranging from about 1.1 to about 1.8 million barrels a day. So you multiply it by 2, you will come up with a factor of, let's say, $3.5 million dollars or so. And you multiply it by 365, it will be just over $1 billion. So the advantage that we are going to derive from buying Russian oil has, come down very, very drastically. That is one thing. The second thing is, if the US really wants to sell oil to us, it has to be competitive. We have been agnostic about buying oil. We started buying it only after the Russia-Ukraine war broke out in 2022. And that too after some, positive signals from the US and some nudging from the US. Please buy Russian oil so that the global oil prices are stabilized and there is no oil price shock in the global economy and on the US consumers. That is what it is well recorded. Janet Yellen is on record having said that. Eric Garcetti, the former US ambassador to India, is on record.
Yes.
So there is plenty of evidence to show that is what happened. But we are not saying that we will buy Russian oil even if it is above the global prices. We will buy it only if it is, a good deal for us. And we will buy American oil. Our import of American oil has been going up because they have also increased their production and they have increasingly, I think, offered better prices. So we are agnostic. We will buy from them. We will buy from, our regular suppliers, Saudi Arabia, Brunei, Malaysia, Qatar, whatever, if we get a good deal. And with the kind of complexity factor that our refineries now have, we can deal with, a very wide range of oil, crude oil, high sulfur content from Brazil, the Urals crude that we are getting at the moment, the Far Eastern crude that we get from Russia, whatever. So that is another huge advantage that we have. We can switch our suppliers depending on the prices that we get.
Okay, so then you're saying that we should approach this from a position of strength, that we have options to explore, and reducing import of Russian oil could make economic sense, but then the signaling effect that you pointed out earlier could lead to long-term consequences for India. Am I right, Dr. Dasgupta?
No, I didn't quite mean that. What I meant was that Russian oil we will continue to buy if it is one of the cheapest oils available in the global market. Sure. And if the Americans are any cheaper than that, we'll buy from the Americans. Even if we have to bring down or, stop buying Russian oil completely. But, one country keeps buying uranium, palladium, fertilizers, and the other country keeps buying gas and oil much more than a group of countries like the EU buys oil and gas much more than India does. India is only 13%. They are 22% of Russian oil and gas supplies, which they buy. Yeah. So then you get onto your high horse and preach to India. That is not something which we are going to take lying down. So we will continue to exercise our strategic autonomy, buy from whichever source is the cheapest, and not switch off buying just because we have been handed out a threat by the US. That's not going to happen. You sell us oil which is cheaper, we'll buy from you.
Okay. Is approaching the WTO an option for India? Do you think that is where some degree of intervention could help, in just settling things down a bit?
Well, the WTO has been, on a steady path of decline ever since 2008. Because 2009, President Barack Obama took over as the president. And he took ages to even send an ambassador to the WTO. It was about 15 months before he could send an ambassador to the WTO. So that is the kind of importance that the US gave to the WTO in President Obama's term. And mind you, President Obama's first priority was sewing up this TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership Deal, with 11 other countries, which he did. And President Trump, before he came to power, in his campaign speeches, he said, "I will walk out of that TPP on the first day of office." And he did that. When he came to power in 2017, January, he walked out of TPP. So all that work which President Obama had done for 8 years went to naught. Of course, there is a CPTPP minus the US, which has taken shape. But it is struggling along. It is just one of those other regional trade agreements. Now, President Obama also, I think, I can share this. There was a US, Democrat also of Democratic affiliation who was a member of the appellate body. That person was not given a second term, which was the usual practice, because that person did not support the US's, imposition of zeroing in anti-dumping proceedings. And the decisions are taken in the appellate body of the WTO by consensus. There is no, note of dissent or dissenting order, etc. That is not the practice. Right. So that person had to quietly leave. So it started with President Obama, and in President Trump's first term, there were no fresh nominations allowed. So the appellate body came to a standstill, because at least out of the 7-member permanent body, at least 3 members have to be there to hear an appeal. So one by one, the members retired. And by December 2019, there was no member left. And President Trump, carried on till, 2021 January. So President Trump ensured that the appellate body was finished. Now, if we refer this dispute to the WTO, which we have done about steel and aluminum, and Brazil has also, raised this issue of 50% tariffs. What happens? The dispute will be heard by a dispute settlement panel of some 3 experts, which is the lower rung of the 2-stage process, judicial process. And if you get a favorable ruling, you can't act on it. Why? Because the appeal process has not been exhausted. So the other side, which has lost, will appeal in the void. There is no appellate body, so the appeal will be kept on the record. And till such time that the appellate body starts functioning, which may be 5 years, 10 years, never, you can't really act. So the WTO as a grievance redressal body or mechanism has now is not in a position to deliver.
Right.
So there's no point in referring anything to the WTO with that. It is very good to affirm your belief that, you are a strong votary of the multilateral system, which we are. All, smaller economies, smaller exporting powers, they stand to gain from a rules-based system which is predictable. India also, and India has a very bright record in the WTO of having complied with all adverse verdicts against it. And the US is the biggest, even before President Obama, the US was the country with the largest number of cases where they failed to comply with the WTO appellate body's rulings also. So, this is something which has been building up, just to put it in perspective. So the WTO at the moment, I don't think can offer any redress, but we have reaffirmed our faith and belief and trust in the global multilateral system. So we have filed an appeal, and we will abide by the WTO discipline to take further action of retaliation, etc.
Okay. My concluding question, Dr. Dasgupta, is the role of China. Prime Minister Modi is attending the SCO summit. What are the expectations from that visit? How crucial is that meeting? In between, China had become a pariah, but now it's become the country that everyone's wooing. And India too has decided that it's probably in our best interest to be aligned or to be toying our relationship with China. How are you looking into this?
China is a humongous power, not only
Hmm.
in the military sense, but in the economic sense. So one can't disregard it, but only at one's peril. Now,
Hmm.
what do we buy from China? More than $100 billion worth. And
Hmm.
it is, capital goods, it is components, it is raw materials. You look at the electronics that we buy from China, it is massive.
Yeah.
I think it is more than $30 billion. You look at
Hmm.
even now the active pharmaceutical industry ingredients which we buy for our pharmaceutical industry. It is
Hmm.
very large. The kind of fertilizers that we buy, the rare earth magnets that we buy, which I think the Chinese have now put a stop to that or brought it
Yeah.
to a thin trickle. So
Hmm.
all these things, the Chinese have the leverage. Then,
Hmm.
this factory in which was making mobile phones, which were basically being exported to the US and other developed countries. Now, the Chinese have withdrawn about 300 engineers from the factory, and they were helping in disseminating the practices and the technology required for assembly operations.
Hmm.
So it is a
Hmm.
setback for India. So the Chinese can, not only are they a very important exporting country to India, and we are very heavily dependent again to keep the wheels of our industry rolling,
Right.
but they are also a military threat for us all along our long border,
Yes.
which now has almost coalesced with that of Pakistan, because the Chinese were active in Operation Sindoor by actively helping the Pakistanis, and the
Absolutely.
naval encirclement which is going on, and the BRI which has now come to our doorstep in Nepal, which may come to Bangladesh. So
Hmm.
we are in a very tough neighborhood. So
Yes.
we have to maintain a good relationship with China. We have to
Hmm.
see to what extent it can stabilize and the Chinese don't take advantage of us, because China
Correct.
also should realize that we are a strong country and we are growing stronger economically by the day and militarily also.
And we're a
So,
democracy. Yeah.
it is not, yeah. So it
Hmm.
is not going to be easy for them to push us around. So
Hmm.
there has to be some kind of a basic understanding. Of course, the border issue, I think, can be, kept on the side for the time being, but
Hmm.
it also has to be resolved at some point of time. The other
Hmm.
issue is about investments. The Chinese are very keen that they should be allowed to make investments in India, but ever since the Galwan clashes, we had
Yes.
put a stop to that. Now there are signs of a thaw in that also, that we will allow them to
Hmm.
come in and invest.
Hmm.
So, of course, not in the strategic industries, but in non-strategic industries. So that is
Hmm.
something which also, and we are going to resume flights to China, direct flights from India to China, which we
Right.
had
Right.
stopped after the Galwan clashes. So I
Hmm.
think there is a process of normalization, but we have been through this many times in the past. Things
Hmm.
have reached a kind of a high, and then, even when President Xi Jinping was here meeting Prime Minister Modi,
Hmm.
they were attacking in Galwan, or they were building up their forces near
Yeah.
Galwan. So
Hmm.
China is again totally unpredictable. It
Hmm.
works according to a well-designed plan and a long-term plan, and
Hmm.
if I may put it very, very bluntly and crudely, no superpower or big power wants another emerging power to come and pose either a challenge to it, or attain equality with it. That is
Hmm.
one of the problems.
Hmm. All right. Okay, thank you so much for that, Dr. Dasgupta. Clearly, very, very complicated times that we are living in. Well, we just hope that it all works out, and it all works out to India's advantage. And probably India has not navigated such a complicated negotiation in a very long time. And like you said, that India is in a very tough neighborhood, so we have to play our cards right, whether it's with China or whether it's with the United States. Thank you so much for joining us on Money Control, and a big thank
Pleasure.
you to all our viewers for joining us as well. Do leave us your thoughts and feedback in the comment section below. We'll be tracking the story very, very closely right here on Money Control. So stay tuned. Thanks so much.